Syracuse, where they help promote STEM education, support military and veteran organizations, and give to the United Way. Learn more at srcinc.com.
You're listening to 88.3 FM WAER Syracuse, your local NPR station from Syracuse University.
SportsNite, your home for all SU sports talk.
Whether it was a 5-goal win or just an overtime win, a win is a win, and especially in a loaded ACC, they're going to look back on this one and say, thank goodness we got a win.
There's just, the question marks are so many that it makes you think, what if we are in for a second-year hangover?
Autry is in obviously a bad situation because of all the backlash he's getting from the fans, because the pressure's high, right? But I also think he has a little bit of leeway.
Breaking down everything from around the Hill.
They almost surrendered that lead in the fourth quarter, which is a concern of mine. I would have preferred to see a full 60-minute performance.
And giving hot takes along the way.
I'm just not convinced. Some of the transfers are promising, but if we look at what, national champions are made of, this team has none of that stuff.
It's SportsNite, and it starts right now.
Well, it's officially the night before Syracuse's rivalry game against a team that they just cannot beat. Welcome into Sports Night alongside Hudson Ridley. I'm Alex Burstein. Syracuse and Clemson football coming up in just over 12 hours. Should be a fun one here on the WAER airwaves. But first, we've got a ton to break down tonight with this game, as well as a couple other sporting contests around the Hill tonight. If you have any takes, especially about this game between Syracuse and Clemson, will the Orange keep it close? You can call in, as always, 315-443-2011. Text in 315-556-3929, or interact with us on Twitter or YouTube at WAER Sports Talk. Hudson, obviously the Tennessee game was big, but that was the first game of the season. This truly feels like the first big game of the season for Syracuse that they could make a statement with, or it could kind of deflate the season.
Exactly. But the Tennessee game, it really could have gone either way, and Syracuse would have been fine. I still think this Clemson game, too, could go either way, and Syracuse would be completely fine. This is your first ACC road test, though, and it's different. It's a different environment than when you play Tennessee on a neutral site. Now, that was a great environment, but now you're going into the belly of the beast in Death Valley. This is a much harder team to compete against in an environment like that than Tennessee was on the road. And you'll hear it tomorrow on the Reed FCNY Construction Coaches Report. Fran Brown agreed. He said that it's harder to play in Death Valley than it is to play that game at Tennessee. So this is the first big true road test for Syracuse. I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Well, Demetrius Samuel Jr., after last week's game, said it kind of felt like high school football in Florida at the Dome last week against Colgate. I do not think it's going to be like that at all at Death Valley tomorrow. We'll talk quickly about that Colgate game. Syracuse just ran past Colgate 66-24. It's a game, you can't take too much out of it because obviously you're playing an FCS opponent.
And not a good FCS opponent
exactly.
either. It's not like Colgate. It's not like Colgate.
Hey, they've played a couple top 25 teams close.
Top 25 teams in the FCS, like Monmouth. Great offense at Monmouth.
That's true.
But that's not my prerogative. That's something where Colgate just has to get over the hill on that. I do think that Syracuse can take a little bit out of that game. What I would take out of that game is that Colgate backups, or Colgate starters, rather, are better than your backups.
Yeah,
Colgate really started to, pull it close at the end. But that game was a blowout. We all knew what that game was.
I mean, it was interesting to see kind of the post-game reaction from Fran Brown and how I think the biggest takeaway was how much confidence he has in Steve Angeli. This was the game where he really cemented himself over Ricky Collins as QB1. And then also Daryl Gill, who had an insane game, a few touchdowns, over 100 receiving yards. those are the two guys tomorrow against Clemson I think really have to show up. Because if you look at Gill, it's his third season with the team. He's had good games each season, but they have not been against good opponents. His best one against a former power conference team, Washington State, but that was playing against their backups.
Exactly.
For Daryl Gill to establish himself as a great player, as a wide receiver one, he has to show something tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, he was a non-factor against Tennessee. Yep. And this is a defense in Clemson that's really tough, and we'll get to that. But I think Daryl Gill, in certain ways, is a very underrated toolsy player. He's got very underrated speed. He runs in the 4x100 team at Syracuse University for track, and people just don't know that. He's got really good vertical leaping ability. He can high point the football. These are things that you don't necessarily see Daryl Gill and say, oh, I can note all these things about him. But he is a very talented player. The only issue is, like you mentioned, those big games, he hasn't shown up yet. But now that he is maybe not the number one option, I'd still give that to Jonte Cook. He could be, but I would give that to Jonte Cook for now. I need to see him tomorrow step up.
I think he looks like, especially last week, almost like Jackson Meeks did last season because he has so much speed to get down the field, and that's what Syracuse needs. They need a deep ball threat because Angeli kind of has accuracy. Sometimes he can throw down the field. You need a wide receiver who can jump up and get the ball. I mean, he was on Randy Moss's top plays of the week.
He was, and I think he's a high point threat in a different way than what Jackson Meeks was. The way Jackson Meeks was a deep ball threat was not speed, it was not size, it was a little bit of physicality, but it was really like body positioning, right? Anywhere that Kyle McCord would throw it, Jackson Meeks would get underneath it, twist his body, box out, do anything to kind of get the leverage that he needed on the DB to catch the ball over the top. Daryl Gill is very different in that way, where if a ball is lobbed up, instead of using his body or positioning, he's going to use his footwork, get the timing correct, jump up, and try to high point it. It's a very different concept, but honestly, in a way, it does make it easier for your quarterback because you are coming back to the ball instead of trying to shield off. You are coming back. I think that makes him unique from other Syracuse wide receivers we've seen in the past few years. The only one I can think of that could actually do that was Rondé Gadsden, who was a tight end. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and then the guy who'll be throwing to him tomorrow afternoon, I should say, Steve Angeli. He's another guy who has impressed so far this season, especially against Colgate. He was great at the end of this UConn game. But if you look at his QB battles these last two games, I mean, no offense to Zach Osborne, but he's no Cade Klubnik, who's going to be a top 5 draft pick maybe in this next year. Well, maybe not anymore. We'll get to his struggles in a second. But Angeli now competing against the cream of the crop of ACC quarterbacks. He needs to show out tomorrow. He's leading the nation in passing. And I think if he doesn't have a good game, there's going to be some real confidence that needs to be talked about.
I don't necessarily know about that. Is Steve Angeli Kyle McCord? No, right? But Kyle McCord was great as a starter at Ohio State and just had a couple slip-ups, right, that Ohio State fans will forever hate him for. Steve Angeli is not in the same vein where he comes in after being a backup, right, and you don't really know what you're going to get with him. It's a similar style of pocket passer, but you don't fully know the experience of what you'll get. You go up against the Tennessee defense that brought in a lot of pieces, retained a good amount, and looked great. And for the first couple weeks, Tennessee's defense has looked great. It's hard to stop Georgia, right? They can't do that. You go up against Clemson tomorrow. I mean, that's another defense that's loaded.
Yeah.
Like, that's hard to get past.
The problem is, though, if he can't play good against these good teams, what's the identity of Syracuse's offense? Because
then it's just an okay offense.
The number one. Yeah.
It's just an okay offense, which, I mean, I truly think that Jeff Nixon's offense is fantastic. And I think Jeff Nixon should be a head coach somewhere else next year.
He almost was.
I mean, he almost was. Temple, I know, was interested in Jeff Nixon. He's a guy, though, that deserves a Power 4 job. I mean, taking Steve Angeli, a guy who had only thrown for 500 yards at most in a single season against backups when he was a backup at Notre Dame, and taking him in 3 weeks to being the leading passer in the nation, that's just a credit to the offense and the fact that they throw the ball 50 times a game. But if you give a good enough roster to Jeff Nixon, he's going to be fantastic. Look what he did with Kyle McCord last year. Look what he's doing with Steve Angeli this year. So I do think a lot of that is on Jeff Nixon.
And now this whole team comes in, and they're going to go to Death Valley to play against Clemson, the team that started the year as one of the top contenders in the nation. And now a little further out, 1-2 on the season, an upset loss to Georgia Tech. there's a lot of questions about this Clemson team. If you have any thoughts about this Tigers squad, make sure to call in 315-443-2011 or text us at 315-556-3929. But we go back to last week, not the Colgate game, but Clemson against Georgia Tech. And this is a Tigers team that just didn't look dominant how they were supposed to. They end up losing out a walk-off field goal. And is this Clemson team still a contender?
I think Georgia Tech is an unfair comparison
That's
because
true.
Georgia Tech being unranked was stupid. Yeah. Georgia Tech is good. There's really no way around that. I think that right now is the hardest team on Syracuse's schedule. That includes Tennessee.
Really?
That includes Notre Dame. That includes, I think Georgia Tech is the hardest team on that schedule, flat out, period. That also includes Clemson. Now, what I will say about Clemson, I don't look back to that Georgia Tech game. I look back 2 weeks ago when they played Troy. They trailed Troy 16-0. If you know where Troy is, call in and tell us, 315-556-3929, because I would love to know how you know that, all right? And they had a 16-0 lead in Death Valley against Clemson. This is a team that can come out flat at times, get in trouble in the fourth quarter. It's not your usual Dabo Swinney coach team.
Yeah. Well, they came out flat last week, too. They were trailing by double digits. Syracuse, though, hasn't been a team that started off games very well. Last week against Colgate, but if you go to Tennessee, trailing by double digits in the first quarter, UConn trailing for much of the first three quarters.
Yeah.
You have a team that can't stop teams early, and then you have a team in Syracuse that can't score against teams early. And it seems like if Syracuse is somehow able to get off to a hot start, that's the only way they contend.
I mean, yeah, if Syracuse is in that game for three quarters, they can win it, right? Because Clemson's fourth quarter, week by week, has been disastrous. But on the other side of that same coin, if Syracuse is out of it within the first quarter of the game, that's it, right? That is it. And obviously, UConn's a different beast. UConn's a different animal. You can come back and beat UConn. But you go on the road to Clemson, you get behind, say, 14 points after a quarter, that's it. So if they come out strong tomorrow, and they kind of flip that switch, sure. Other than that, I don't really see anything.
Well, I think because of that, this coaching battle is going to be so huge tomorrow. Because Dabo Swinney, he's struggled, but he's still one of the greatest coaches in college football.
Yeah.
Fran Brown, I think this is one of his biggest tests yet as a coach. Because when you look at the ACC, I think Clemson's the closest to the SEC. I think that's a fair comparison. Maybe Florida State.
Year by year, yes.
Yes.
In terms of this year.
This year, no.
But year by year, yes.
In terms of the crowd they bring, the
vibe,
atmosphere, the coaches, the recruiting, all of it. Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
And now you have Fran Brown, a coach that was in the SEC with Georgia on their defensive backs. Now he comes to the ACC, and he's trying to change Syracuse into this powerhouse. Can he replicate stuff he's seen in the past against a powerhouse program? It's a huge question mark.
It's just so hard. I think the thing is, too, with Syracuse when they play against Clemson, the reason that Syracuse generally does keep it close over this last decade of time, even though they've lost 10 of the last 11, they've kept it close and won one of them. The reason being is Clemson consistently overlooks Syracuse, it seems, year by year. I think if Syracuse is almost too loud and flying too over the radar, that doesn't necessarily bode well because they'll be ready, right? I also think, though, this week Clemson has a different motivation, which is the fact that they are 1-2 right now, and they need to right the ship. Because if they lose to Syracuse this week, no more college football playoff.
Yeah, I mean, you're 0-2 in conference play. Literally no more opportunities. It's almost like, I feel like Duke basketball against Syracuse, not this past year, but in previous years.
Interesting.
They
where you overlook
the Orange.
Them, yes.
Yeah, and then Syracuse comes in and makes those games close. I think the question with Clemson, though, is that motivation enough to overcome their actual skill? I mean, we've talked about their troubles, but you have to remember, this is still a team. Cade Klubnik has been with this team for a few years. He dominated against Syracuse 2 years ago. And then you have this defensive line that is just ridiculous. Both lines, the offensive and defensive line. But Syracuse has struggled at both of those positions this year, and now you throw in this Clemson team playing with the heart on their shoulder, and they're also having the skill.
Yeah.
Syracuse has to contend in the trenches.
So there are two players tomorrow that really do scare me. Syracuse's offensive line is mostly made of people who were either not at Syracuse last year or did not start, right? Across the board, there is only one returning starter from last year's offensive line, and that's Demetrius Witherspoon.
And hopefully he's healthy.
Hopefully he's healthy. We don't even know if he's healthy or not. And so that becomes an issue when you face T.J. Parker, one of the best edge rushers, a projected top 15 draft pick, and then also Peter Woods, who's a guy that could potentially go top 5 in the next NFL draft. And those are just the pass rushers. They have a corner that's projected to go in the top 30. In 2 years, Sammy Brown, one of their better Mike linebackers, honestly, their best Mike linebacker, will go probably within the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. This team is loaded when Syracuse has not just the offensive line that it has, but the inexperience that it has on that offensive line. Fran Brown said they're going to compete this week, right? They're going to compete. But my goodness, I don't know how you stop
Well,
that.
you have to get the ball out of Angeli's hands in a second or less because the pocket's going to be collapsing.
Yeah, so you have to scheme that up.
You have to, and Yasin Willis is probably going to be playing from what we've heard, but it's not a definite answer. He's your running back. You have to have a good performance. If you go back to Georgia Tech, a huge part of that win was because Jamal Haynes was dicing up this offense. And the one thing that Syracuse doesn't have, I mean, Steve Angeli's a better rusher than Kyle McCord, but he's not a quarterback who's able to run the ball like King is or like some of these other ACC schools. If Angeli's holding the ball for more than 2 or 3 seconds, there's going to be a lot of sacks tomorrow.
Exactly. That's the big problem, too. And I think this kind of ties back to something all the way at the beginning of the season, right, where Fran Brown said that the main differentiator between Steve Angeli and Ricky Collins was the speed of the game for him and the processing. If that is true, if that is the case, then Steve Angeli better be processing quick against Clemson because he is not going to have any time to get that ball out whatsoever.
And that's also the atmosphere. I mean, it's going to be 2 times louder than anything he's used to this season. Can you remain calm in this situation? Can you really lead your team? I mean, Fran Brown said he's the leader of this squad. Can he actually be a leader at Death Valley and command his troops? That obviously the playing is important, but also how he just composes himself on the field. If he's not composed, it could be a disaster.
I think the biggest thing with Fran Brown is the way to get your guys ready. You have nothing to lose, right? You're going to Clemson. Clemson has everything to lose. When you're playing against a team that has everything to lose and everything is on the line, your reputation, your home record, your college football playoff chances. Dabo Swinney, after 3 weeks, just had to field questions about him potentially being fired, which is really dumb.
Crazy.
But that's still true. When you have all of that tied together, Clemson has everything to lose. Syracuse has nothing to lose right now.
Yeah, they're playing with house money, you could say, because they would love a win. It would be great for Fran Brown's future, trying to move this culture forward, as he would say. But it's not the end of the world. You just want to keep it close against this Clemson squad. Well, that's just about all the time we have for this block. But when we return, we have someone who knows this Syracuse football team better than 99% of this campus. Daily Orange beat reporter for football, Cooper Andrew, joins us in just a second. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on SportsNite.
Always keeping you up to date, WAER is supported by Hearth Cabinets and More. Located on Buckley Road West in Liverpool, Hearth Cabinets and More showroom features gas and wood stoves, fireplaces, and inserts from Vermont Castings, Heat and Glow, and Majestic. Also offering a variety of cabinetry from Waypoint Living Spaces and Omega that can help transform empty space in your home into usable and functional storage. Learn more at hearthcabinetsandmore.com.
Carly Hartzman writes music in a Southern Gothic rhythm that's inspired by home.
I feel like all my songs are tributes to my friends and my life. I don't have a great memory, so I'm just trying to hold on.
New music from the band Wednesday and all the latest news Saturday on Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Saturday morning from 8 to 10 on WAER.
On last week's Wait, Wait, Brian Babylon didn't think the new mascot in New York's Anti-Phones in Schools campaign, Frankie Focus, would be very effective.
I thought Frankie Focus was an Adderall dealer.
I'm Peter Sagal. If you won't put down your phone, then just use it to listen as we go to St. Louis to talk to Cardinals broadcaster Chip Carey on this week's Wait, Wait, the news quiz from NPR.
Saturday morning at 11 on 88.3 FM WAER.
It's Sports Night on WAER. Hudson Ridley here with Alex Burstein, cruising along from 8 to 9 p.m. on 88.3, and we welcome in a very special guest, Daily Orange beat writer Cooper Andrews, covering the football team this season for 2025. Cooper, for our viewers right now, instead of our listeners, our viewers can't see it. Cooper's got a big gash on his nose here. This is an interesting sign. What happened to the other guy?
You know, you don't want to see the other guy, first of all. They always told me that I had a face for radio. I said I have a face for behind a computer screen, not even remotely close to a microphone, anywhere where anyone could know what I'm going through right now. And yeah, I have a big gash on my nose. We don't need to talk about that, but great to be here. A Daily Orange WAR collab. I never thought we'd see the day.
Yeah, they said this is something that can't happen, and the reason why we bring you on is your expertise in the Syracuse football team this year. You've been covering them last year and then week by week this year. Alex and I left off just a few minutes ago talking about Syracuse's offensive line versus Clemson's defensive line. It is a real big test for the Syracuse offensive line. I mean, personally, I don't know if they can keep up. I don't have too much faith. What, in your opinion, does Syracuse maybe have to do, or not have to do, but what can they do to at least keep up a little bit?
I think it starts out with a little bit of personnel adjustments. I really would like to see Byron Washington as a major part of this offensive line rotation this week. I think he's the only guard on this roster who can actually successfully pull as a guard, and that can add an entire new layer to Jeff Nixon's scheme. I mean, he hasn't had a single guard who can pull his entire time being here. Last year, we saw how creative he was every single part of the field except for offensive line. It was very bare bones every single time. I think Byron Washington, even at his absurd stature, 6'8", nearly 400 pounds. He just recently dropped below 400 pounds. He's at about 390, finally at playing weight. I think they need to get him involved. I don't really see many of these other guys stacking up with a really loaded Clemson front, but I do want to see some personnel adjustment. You need to have a rotation in there. They're going to get gassed early. I think that especially if Syracuse, gets the ball early, gets a couple drives of momentum, they're going to be gassed, and you need to get a rotation in there. But Byron Washington, I want to see him at guard. He's one of the only guys who actually has the size to keep up with some of these Clemson monsters up front.
And he looked good last week in his first true appearances, true regular snaps. It was Colgate, but he looked solid.
Yeah, his PFF grade was above 80 as a pass blocker. Yes, as you said, against Colgate, but he still maintained some sort of stamina even at his weight, his stature. And as a big guy myself, they always tell us, you're going to get a little bit tired if you're running out there for a while. But Byron Washington did a really good job getting 26 snaps, at offensive guard. I think that if they get him in against Clemson, that's going to be a huge, huge addition for them if he can get a little bit more consistency going forward.
Could you imagine being 6'8", 400, or really on the other side of 6'8", 400, you see that guard pulling at you, trying to run you over? It sounds like a nightmare. It's a freight train coming at you. I mean, that adds a whole nother layer and dimension to your offense. Pass blocking wise, though, have you seen him keep up with the rest of the offensive line?
I mean, I think he's better than most of the rest of the offensive line. Again, I think he's the only guard who has the exact combination of power and speed that it takes to be successful both in D1 and potentially in the NFL. I haven't really liked what I've seen thus far of someone like TJ Ferguson. I feel like he's been a little bit weaker in there. I don't think his arms are very strong at all. I don't think he's been very good run blocking as well. I feel like there's been a lot of interior pressure on any sort of given run play, especially when they've had Yassine Willis in there, who's a little bit more proficient in between the tackles, as we know, with his more physical running style. So I think we really need to see Byron in there because he has more skill than a lot of these guys. And I think eventually once we go on and see how Byron progresses here at Syracuse, he's going to move to tackle. That's exactly what happened when he was at DeSoto in high school, a powerhouse program in Texas. He was started out as a guard. Then he moved to tackle once he got his weight even further down, a little bit over 400 pounds at the time. But I think he has even more skill than a lot of these guys, Hudson.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially when you look at some of the pieces at tackle right now and you think, boy, would Byron Washington sliding over to tackle now be the worst idea? Now, you don't want to move away from what's worked. Right. I think that's also part of it.
Well, has it worked?
That's true. That's true. Byron Washington at guard has worked.
That's true. But
anything else, I think you're right.
How about Demetrius Wearsman? I mean, if he's healthy, how much of an impact is that?
Well, I think he has a lot to improve on, as we've seen. I think he's been rather unreliable, especially against vaunted pass rushes. Last year against Virginia Tech, against Boston College, even against a team like California, Demetrius Witherspoon was not very good. I really think that he is going for, I think this is really, he's going to be one of the players that determines whether Syracuse gets close in this game or gets blown out in this game. He needs to protect that right, and I really think that Steve Angeli has a really difficult time on his blind side. If he can at least get some clean looks on the right side, Jeff Nixon can open up that quick passing game on the right side for him. If Witherspoon is stable at that right tackle position, they can have a lot of success on offense. If he gets dominated out there, I don't know, it's going to be tough.
And then kind of flipping this to the Syracuse D-line, I know you wrote this week about kind of the pass rush identity of this team. No one has multiple sacks on the team. Is Clemson a team you can even see any progress on that, or do you think Clemson's O-line is so good that you kind of have to wait another week for progress?
Well, Cade Klubnik's pocket presence is not very good, so this might be a decent week, actually, even in Death Valley, to get some pass rushing opportunities. But talking to edge coach, defensive line coach Nick Williams this week, they're kind of just hoping to figure out who's going to emerge as a real game wrecker for this team. They brought in David Reese in the portal, 8th-year guy out of California, specifically to rush the passer. Well, right now, he has 0 sacks. He had 3 quarterback hits against UConn. He was pretty disruptive in the second half. But when are the actual pass rushes going to turn into sacks? John Gruden says it all the time. I don't want pressures. I want actual results. I want
the
sacks.
Quarterback on the ground.
Exactly. And they haven't done a very good job of that over the past 2 years. Last year, their PFF ranks pass rushing was below the bottom half. Even this year, it's below the median. And they lost so much talent. They lost Fadil Diggs. They lost their only good pass rushing threat as a linebacker, Marlo Wax. They haven't blitzed at all this year, and it's because they don't have the guys who can. And we really need to see someone on the edge like David Reese step up, I think, for Syracuse to have any success going forward. He's one of the only guys that has the right experience, the right actual numbers and experience playing on a team like Cal. He had 11 sacks over the past 2 years in the ACC. So, we'll see if David Reese can be one of those guys to step up going forward. But I see him. I see someone like Kevin Jobity, who had a big sack against UConn, to be guys who can step up on this pass rush going forward. But it's not really going to be about just the edges going, off each game. It's going to be a lot about that interior presence as well, getting those sacks. And we'll see if they can do that. I think they also need to blitz a little bit more, but that's above my pay grade.
Yeah. It's almost tough, though, to blitz when you face, especially Tennessee. That was a really hard team to blitz against, because not only is their offensive line so good, and they had a lot of experience, but Syracuse's corners matched up with the wide receivers of Tennessee, even though they were experienced, very fast. You look at guys who are shooting onto the scene like Braylon Staley in that game. Like, everything is working out for Tennessee in that game if you blitz. Yeah. So they had to hang back. A team like Colgate, though, and a team like UConn, you'd want to see a little bit more pressure. You only had one big-time wide receiving threat against UConn. You only had one big-time wide receiving threat against Colgate.
And those were the games to try things out. Because now you're playing Clemson.
Now you have no more chances. The
Yeah.
chance to try things is done.
Yeah.
It's over.
And that's the point of concern going in against Clemson. The second actual good wide receiving corps that this team is seeing, how are they going to do against them when they don't have the luxury, as you said, to blitz that often? They're going to be a 17-year-old Demetrius Samuel Jr. up against 2 really good Clemson wide receivers. We'll see what Syracuse does rotating Chris Peel and Demetrius Samuel against those top options, but those are 2 inexperienced guys, even though Chris Peel coming over from Georgia. They're very inexperienced in terms of actual snaps in college football.
Yeah.
We'll see if they can actually be aggressive like you were saying, or if they're going to be limited against this team of such talent like Clemson.
Yeah, you give Samuel and Peel a couple more years.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right? But right now, this is very early.
Yeah.
You
He's
look
17 years old.
He's 17 years old, and Chris Peel on the other side played 3 games at Georgia in cleanup opportunities. So neither of those guys, your number 1 corner, your number 2 corner, neither of them have a wealth of experience. They've really just played 3 games that really matter. They've played 3 games as starters in college football, and now they have to go up against Bryant Wesco, Antonio Williams, if he is healthy. This may be the second best wide receiving core on paper in the country. But as we know with Clemson, on paper doesn't really matter as much. This has been a tough start for Clemson this year. That's been a big part of the problem. 1 and 2 to begin things. What have you seen from Clemson so far this season that's kind of derailed them a little bit?
Well, I've seen that Cade Klubnik hasn't had someone like Antonio Williams to throw the ball to. They've been really, really one-dimensional passing-wise. Wesco is their only receiver with over 100 yards, and he has 310 to lead the team. I think that they're going to have Antonio Williams back this week. Clemson posted a graphic of him as one of the team captains against Syracuse. I think that's an unofficial confirmation that he's going to play, and I think that if the Clemson can get him more involved with the offense as he was expected to be, they're going to take a little bit of, a rise upwards going forward, and that starts against Syracuse, who, as we've talked about, has such a young cornerback room. That's not a fantastic way to start, against a team with such good wide receivers like Clemson. As we saw against Tennessee, this team really struggled against downfield threats like Chris Brazzell. So it'll be tough going up against those guys, but I'll be interested to see how Syracuse can, make some of those secondary rotations to not have someone match up against someone the whole game, because they're not going to have someone follow around Antonio Williams or follow around Bryant Wesco the entirety of the game.
That would be incredibly hard, and Syracuse's defense would get gassed at that point as well. We have a caller on the line. Tyler Aitken from Syracuse calls in. Tyler, what's on your mind right now?
Hudson, thanks for having me on. I wanted to take advantage of the guest you have here, Cooper Andrews. I read, the score predictions that the Daily Orange put out for this game. I saw Cooper had Syracuse losing 30-27, and so I guess, Cooper, I want to ask you, if that happens, if Syracuse loses a fairly high-scoring game by 3 points, what does that mean for the team? Is that a successful loss? Is that a awful game? Like, where does that put Syracuse in the context of, a difficult schedule that's coming up for the rest of the year?
Well, Tyler, it's fantastic to hear your voice. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. I believe out in Maryland.
Yes.
But I think that there's no loss that can ever be a good loss, as we know. Fran Brown talks about all the time. There are no moral victories. I think it depends, one, on the context of the game. I personally think that the pass rush is going to be a big determiner of this game, on both sides. Syracuse is not going to be able to stop Clemson's pass rush, and Clemson's pass rush, Syracuse's pass rush is not going to get home on Cade Klubnik. But I do think that in terms of how the ACC looks right now, Clemson might not really be in the upper echelon. So in terms of if this is a close game and they lose, and Syracuse is finally getting close against a team like Clemson, who they were expected to lose by a little bit more than that too, I don't really think it looks as strong, because Clemson doesn't seem like they're going to be a real competitor for the ACC championship or the college football playoff down the line. So I think it really determines on, how Syracuse actually fares in this game. I think that they're going to start out well in the first half and really not do very well in the second half. I think Nixon's going to scheme up a pretty good start to the game, but in the second half, Clemson's adjustments are going to come back to bite Syracuse, and we'll just see how the game goes. But I think overall, it's not going to be some loss that you can make a lot of major predictions off how this team's trajectory is going to be going forward. I think Clemson's a solid team. I think Syracuse is a solid team, and I think it'll be a close 3-point game.
Tyler, what do you see happening?
I just feel like everyone's gotten a little too down on Clemson. I agree. I think Clemson wins in what could be a close game, but similar to how Cooper said that, if Clemson might not be the cream of the crop, and so if you can't beat Clemson, and then you have to, play Notre Dame, you have to play Miami on the road, which, my goodness, will that be a horrendous game.
Yeah.
You got to go on the road to Georgia Tech, who looks pretty good. It's like, well, in a vacuum, Clemson on the road is an insane game, but in the sense of Syracuse's season this year, I just think if this is a loss and Clemson is not as good as people think they are, then it's going to be a really, really ugly year. And I think this could be kind of the first wake-up call to that. I think Tennessee is whatever. I think a loss to Clemson, and then the Tigers end up being a pretty bad team. I think that's a recipe for disaster. But maybe I'm just too pessimistic. We'll see.
It's still Clemson on the road in Death Valley. Yeah. This is still a Dabo Swinney coach team. You still have multiple top 20 draft picks on the team. If you lose by 3, I don't think the narrative out of the game is necessarily going to be, Syracuse is going down the hole this season, because
no, I'm just saying if Syracuse loses one of their more winnable games, I think it's not Syracuse is going down the hole for the rest of the year. It's more of like well, that's one of the ones you could have won, and so the record might not be great. I've been consistent in that I think Syracuse's record this year does not matter one bit for the long-term success of the program. It would just be unfortunate if you leave one on the table, and that could be the difference between a bowl game and no bowl game.
I think your example of a winnable game is very interesting. That was Tyler Aiken from Syracuse. Tyler, thank you for joining the show. We have a whole lot more to talk about here on Sports Night. Still 26 minutes left before we hit the 9 o'clock hour. So if you want to call in just like Tyler did, give us a ring, 315-443-2011. Tyler brings up an interesting point about the Syracuse schedule the rest of the way and what you can actually deem as a winnable game. I have it up here. Come back and you play Duke. It's not necessarily an easy game. Duke is pretty solid.
It's winnable, though.
It's
certainly
winnable.
A winnable game.
But that is winnable, right? SMU, on the road. SMU is good, but they're not as good as they were last year. That's a winnable game. Pitt, at home, is winnable. You go on the road to Georgia Tech, I don't know if you can win that game, but you come back home and you play a measly North Carolina, that's winnable. At this point, you face Miami on the road, Notre Dame on the road. I don't see you winning either of those, but Boston College, that's winnable. So those are 5 games on the schedule left that are winnable outside of Clemson. I don't think if they lose to Clemson, that's necessarily taking the wind out of your sails and saying, that's it. That's the thing that did it, right? You're 2-1 right now. It's 3 games into the season. What, the season's over in 4 games? The Syracuse team was never going to make the college football playoff, right? It's 90% upperclassmen. That's not a real stat. But it's a lot of upperclassmen, right? Or sorry, underclassmen, rather. It's a lot of underclassmen. You didn't figure they were going to make it far anyway. So I guess it just depends on what your bar is for a successful team this season to determine whether or not this Clemson game, in quotes, is it for the year, you know?
Well, Tyler said he doesn't think the record matters at all. If this team finishes with 3 wins, I think there's going to be a ton of question marks.
Yeah,
I think you need to get 4, 5.
5, probably.
There are certainly extremes into this scenario that would make it either an extremely unbelievable season for Fran Brown or an utter disaster, but I don't see this team finishing with anything less than 5 wins, quite honestly. I think even after Clemson, some of the quarterback competition that they face is even tougher than a guy like Klubnik down the stretch. I do think there are a lot of winnable games on here, as Hudson mentioned, and I do think Clemson itself is definitely a winnable game, more winnable than years past, I would say. Overall, a winnable game still. I don't think the record really matters at all, though. I think the big thing that determines how this team can succeed going forward is who stays from this current roster. Are they going to get random guys in April transferring out of the program like Murad Watson? Are they going to get their top receiver randomly leaving for a Big Ten program in the middle of spring camp? They need to make sure that they keep the guys that can be building blocks for this program going forward that are currently on the roster. And if they do that, this year is a success no matter if they make a bowl game. If they don't, no matter what happens.
There's been a lot this week on various media outlets and Fran Brown talking that Fran Brown has helped players get bigger packages from other schools, and he's been honest with players when he doesn't think Syracuse is enough money for them. Where do you think that puts the program?
Well, I think it's a little early for Fran Brown to be making bold claims that he can't make in terms of what Syracuse can actually offer athletes. I know that they're building their NIL base, and it's not going to turn around in 2 years. I am sure that they're receiving a lot more funding than they did in the Dino era, just in terms of who's actually coming to Syracuse on a yearly basis. One would think. But I'm not really sure if right now is the right time to make like a major take in terms of, how much money Syracuse currently has, because it's a time thing. I think in a few years, we'll start to see that problem a lot less with this team. But right now, I think Fran Brown being the real guy that he is, that's why a lot of people come to him. They're not going to get some fake, quite honestly, Dabo, Lane Kiffin type personality with him. They're going to get the realest possible guy. And if that means leaving Syracuse, that means leaving Syracuse. It really depends on the case. But I like that Fran does that on a personal level. And I think that in the next couple of years, we'll start to see that him doing that a whole lot less because this program should start to get more money.
Mm-hmm. We've kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit here, too, to focus on what we see in a few years. But if this game really does hinge a lot, like Tyler suggested that just a few minutes ago, what do you think is not necessarily maybe a respectable score for Syracuse? You don't have them winning the game, and you only have them losing by 3.
Yeah.
But what do you think would be a respectable gap for this Syracuse team to lose by?
I think if they stick within a possession, then you can essentially make this as moral of a victory as you possibly can. I think if you go anything over a possession, that probably means there was a really regrettable turnover. That probably means there was a really bad miscommunication in the secondary that led to a major Clemson touchdown. I think that if you stay within that one possession range, it's going to look a whole lot better. They're probably going to keep their turnover margin pretty low, and they're going to, you would think block at least better than some people think that they're going to up front. But I think if you get over that one possession range, it's going to look like it's a lot more of a negative-filled loss for Syracuse when it could be a loss that has a lot of building blocks going forward this season.
I think it matters a ton how physical Syracuse is because you talked about that turnover margin. And last week, Clemson was sloppy with the ball.
They really were.
Turning it over, interceptions. I mean, Klubnik got hit so hard that the ball just popped out. This Syracuse team hasn't been physical. Do you think they have a chance to be physical tomorrow?
I mean, being physical is a mindset. I think it kind of goes two ways. One, you got to get up for the game.
Yeah.
I think Fran Brown is going to get these guys up for the game. Fran Brown has never been in an environment like this as a head coach. I don't really count the neutral site, in quotes, environment in Atlanta as, a major road test for him. I know it was loud, a lot of Tennessee fans in there, obviously, but that's not a real road game. This is a real road game. Last year, he didn't play in any environments like this. The NC State environment was decently electric, but it's small fry compared to Death Valley. I think he's going to get these guys up for the game. I'm not really quite sure how much playing Clemson's music in the facility going into the week is going to help, but I do think that really that physicality is a mindset thing, and I think Fran will set the tone there. At the same time, Syracuse doesn't have players who are strong.
Nope.
They have players who are light. They have a lot of D linemen under 300 pounds. I don't know if they have the actual size and strength to be physical against this Clemson team. They can be physical against Colgate and UConn. Can you actually be physical against Clemson? You might think you're being physical, but your actions might not show it.
Like you said, though, it's a mindset, too. I don't think I've ever seen Fran Brown more jacked up for a game in this year in 4 games now at this point. It's not a big sample size, but Fran Brown is fired up this week about this game. He almost seems giddy thinking about this upcoming game. And I think it's also because Syracuse has a chance to make a statement. We talked about it earlier. Syracuse is playing with house money right now. They have absolutely nothing to lose in this regard, whereas Clemson has everything to lose at this point.
Yeah. Well, I think that giddiness might come from Fran smelling a little bit of blood in the water with Clemson being 1-2 this season. I think there should be a little bit of a fear factor with that comes into play because, as you guys were talking about earlier, Clemson has a ton to play for in this game. I think, as you mentioned, Alex, they're done from the college football playoff if they lose this game. And that should also get Syracuse up, too. You're essentially in a Game 4 or Week 4 elimination game. So, yeah, I see why Fran Brown is giddy, and I think he really sees this Clemson team as potentially the most beatable Dabo Swinney roster that he could ever face while he's here at SU.
It's like Miami last year. Ended the season for the Hurricanes.
Yeah, exactly. Very true. Fran Brown smells blood in the water. That blood may be coming from the gash in Cooper Andrews' nose. That was Cooper Andrews, beat reporter for the Daily Orange. Cooper, thank you for joining Sports Night. It was a great time having you on.
It was a pleasure. Let's make this a regular thing.
I would love that. I would love that. And we still have more Sports Night to come after this. 18 more minutes here on WAER, so don't go anywhere. Sports Night back just after this.
Always here for you, WAER Syracuse Public Media is supported by Practice Resources LLC, a healthcare billing organization providing advanced medical billing, medical record solutions, and healthcare IT services to physicians across central New York since 1996. Practice Resources LLC provides services to over 500 healthcare providers in upstate New York in over 150 locations. Information can be found online at prldocs.com.
You can think of the World Cafe as the greatest playlist you never have to worry about making. You'll hear artists you know and love next to exciting new bands you might fall in love with from all different genres. Plus, in-depth interviews with musicians from all across the musical spectrum. There's no algorithm behind it, just real human beings. Join me, Raina Duras, on the next World Cafe.
Saturday afternoons at 1 o'clock on 88.3 WAER, your local NPR station from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University.
Delve into the rich tapestry of acoustic-led folk, roots, and Americana music here on 88.3 FM WAER. Enjoy national and international acts, as well as local artists every Sunday with host Pete Thomas. Whether you're seeking the comfort of timeless classics or contemporary gems and music discovery, don't miss Common Threads, Sundays from 2 to 5, exclusively on 88.3 WAER, your local NPR station.
Back here on Sports Night, just over 15 minutes to go in the show. We've talked a ton about Clemson versus Syracuse football. Should be a thrilling game tomorrow in Death Valley. But let's take a moment and switch from the gridiron to the hardwood, because we finally have the conference schedule for Syracuse men's basketball. The season just about a month or so away before exhibition games get going. And we want to hear your thoughts about the Syracuse basketball team in 2025 and 2026. You can call in 315-443-2011, 315-556-3929 for the text-in number. Hudson, this is a Syracuse team that has a ton of expectations, kind of the opposite of the football team, who are playing with house money all season. This basketball team needs to make the tournament. We have this ACC schedule now, and I think the first game of the season, Clemson, right before the turn of the calendar of 2026, is going to be a huge metric for this team, because Clemson's kind of in a similar spot to Syracuse about where they are in the rankings of basketball. If Syracuse can win that game, that sets the momentum right.
Exactly, because Clemson is still thought of as a team in the basketball realm that is the team that they've been in years prior. That's not necessarily the case. I thought last year's March Madness team was pretty good for Clemson, but there are still holes this time around, especially losing some of the big depth that they did. So now Clemson going on the road to Syracuse. The only issue is that is either December 30th or December 31st. They have not decided what time that game is yet, but the day before New Year's, student body's gone, so your student section is eliminated. Is the Dome going to get up for that game?
I think the fans will.
I think.
Like the local fans.
I think so. I think so. But it all depends on what Syracuse does leading up to ACC play to get you into the games. Because last year, I mean, the crowds were solid to begin the year, but then you have close games with Lemoyne to open the season, close game with Colgate, double overtime with Youngstown State, and that derails everything. Syracuse has a lot of those tomato cans this year as well, which should be teams that you will beat up on, right? But that's just not necessarily always the case with this team. So ACC play, the crowds getting into it really only factor in terms of how many people will be there from what you've put on tape those weeks before. What do you do against a Delaware State, a Monmouth, Binghamton, right? That is how you will draw the crowds for Clemson and Pitt and Florida State and so on.
Well, I think the problem is last year it was a new team. Judah Mintz was gone. You had a lot of new pieces. And somehow a year later, it also feels like a new team because you have some returners. You have Donnie Freeman. You have J.J. Starling still here. But there's a lot of new pieces. And when you have all those new pieces, well, yes, but that's why they struggle in the starting few games. So it's hard to imagine a scenario where they're winning blowout games to start the year.
I don't know. This is why I think different than that, and why I genuinely think this year's team will be so much better than last year's team. So Syracuse last year took a big swing and a miss in the portal, right? Adrian Autry wanted to change the way that Syracuse played offense last year, and he said it within the first few games, especially after the second game of the year against Colgate. He said, "We're trying to play 20 more possessions a game," which is not easy. We're trying to play 20 more possessions a game. That is significantly ticking up the tempo. Well, when you have a center like Eddie Lampkin last year, where it's really tough for him to get up and down the floor and play 20 possessions a game. Oh, by the way, your backup center is 7'3", and it's hard for him to move up and down the court. Okay, so what do you have in transition? Nothing, right? But now you go in the portal and you get a guy like William Kyle. He is a transfer from UCLA. When you look at his stats on paper, nothing stands out, right? That's because in UCLA and you're playing a lot in the half court, sure, when you try to get out and run the break like Syracuse is going to try to do, William Kyle is only 6'9". He's much smaller than Eddie Lampkin,
athletic.
but he's uber athletic. Yeah. That's going to fit the team so much more. And that's why I think it's going to be different, is because the team matches the style that Adrian Autry wants to play. So I'm giving him a little bit of slack from last year, too, just to see if it gels with this year's team. But on the other side of that card, if it doesn't gel with this year's team,
I mean, you need to you almost need to make the tournament this year.
Yeah.
And I think this ACC schedule is very favorable, especially at the start. I mean, you go through their first 6 games. Clemson, winnable. Georgia Tech, winnable. You should beat Pitt. Florida State is a up-and-down game. And then you have Boston College and Virginia Tech. Those first 6 games are all teams that are either at Syracuse's level or below their level. Mm-hmm. If Syracuse can start off ACC play 5-1, 6-0, that's a completely turned table from the last couple of years.
I mean, yeah. I guess if you go team by team, Clemson. Yep. That's a team that's stooped down to your level. Georgia Tech is a beatable one. Pitt at Pitt is never easy.
No, but they're always close.
It's always close. You play Florida State at home, Boston College, Virginia Tech. Even Miami was bad last year.
Exactly.
You don't really get to the good teams till you get to, Will Wade's NC State, I bet, is going to be fantastic.
If you look at the next 4 games, it's ridiculous.
But that's not for a while, though. So I think you're right.
Yeah.
If they do start off ACC play 6-0, I mean, this is a team that has the pieces, right? Maybe for the first time in a couple of years, I see this team being the most complete roster that they've had. The only issue is the mindset there? Has it changed? Can they play defense now, right? Can they play defense? It was a huge issue last year. You didn't really have the solid offensive identity. So many questions last year, which you think you have answers to this year, but do you really? Like, that's the issue. That's the problem. Do we really have answers?
Syracuse men's basketball has a couple more weeks to figure out those answers, but Syracuse football, they need these answers as soon as possible. Alex Burstein and Hudson Ridley with you for 10 more minutes. If you have any last-minute thoughts on Clemson versus Syracuse men's football tomorrow, you can call in 315-443-2011 or text us at 315-556-3929. Well, Hudson, we've talked a lot about how Syracuse isn't the favorite in this one, but Clemson's struggling. What are kind of some thoughts on how this game plays out and eventually kind of a final score prediction here?
So, in my opinion, I do see Syracuse keeping this within what the spread is. The spread is 17 points. I see Syracuse keeping this within that 17-point range. Now, I don't think Syracuse's defense can stop a Clemson offense that hasn't clicked yet this year, but they faced some tougher defenses, right? LSU, very good on defense. Georgia Tech flies around, very physical. Troy is Troy. You probably should have put more on them. My prediction, 31-21. Clemson beats Syracuse.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's reasonable, and I think that's still a moral loss. We talk about moral victories. That's still a moral loss. You put an extra touchdown on there, make it 31-28. I think that's a moral win.
You think Syracuse gained 20 points against that defense?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I think we underrate the pass game a little bit and the fact that the pass game can totally put up numbers. They have depth at the wide receiver position that we didn't really consider they had at the beginning of the year. Darryl Gill looks good. Jonte Cook we knew was going to be good. Justice Ross Simmons looked good towards the end of last year and is good this year. So all those things considered, the depth at wide receiver I think is fine enough to put up 20-plus points on Clemson.
The problem is Gill's the only one who's been game in, game out consistent. Justice Ross Simmons was good, but got hurt for the second half of last week's game. Do you have consistent wide receiver play?
See, that's the tough part. I really am wondering about the consistency of Jonte Cook more than the other two.
And exactly, because the other two have played good in every game, but Cook
is still a question mark.
Yeah.
He's still a question mark. And as far as slot receivers go, he's prototypical size, speed, strength. Like, he has that to be a slot receiver. His route running is what you would want it to be for your starting slot in the ACC. But the biggest issue is, are they scheming him open? Does Angeli have enough time to get it to him? I still do think they put up 20 points, in fact 21, but I don't see them going much further than that. The biggest crux for me is the defense.
Yeah.
I don't think the defense will keep up with Clemson's offense, even though Clemson's offense is struggling.
Yeah, and I think it's just hard to imagine a scenario where Clemson loses 3 of their first 4 games.
Yeah.
And Cade Klubnik, he's playing for his career right now. You're a guy who was expected to be a first-round draft pick, and now your team, you're leading them. They're 1-2. Klubnik has a ton to play for tomorrow, and that's why I have Clemson over the Orange 27-14. I'm not as bought in on this Syracuse offense yet. Yes, Angeli can throw the ball, but is Daryl Gill going to be able to be open and make catches downfield against this Clemson secondary?
I mean, it all depends on Jeff Nixon.
Yeah.
But I trust Jeff Nixon in a spot like that. I really do. I think it comes down to the execution, too, of the players on Jeff Nixon's game plan. I trust Jeff Nixon to scheme that up. What's the biggest holdup for you? Is it the pass game? Because the run game, I mean, Yasin Willis is expected to play, but we don't truly know.
Well, exactly. And there's not enough solid options tomorrow for Syracuse against Clemson. Guys that I can say they're going to go out, maybe score a touchdown, get you close to 70, 80 yards. Maybe Daryl Gill. After that, Willis, if he was healthy, I'd be a lot more comfortable because it was seen the last couple of weeks. You can run against this Clemson team if you're creative. That's the other thing. You got to be creative. But Willis was injured. Nixon against this team, he's not a power back. He's kind of a Quint Allen can do a little bit of everything type back.
Yeah.
I don't know if that gets you a ton of yards against this Clemson team. And then the wide receiver core, I don't know. Like Dan Villari, I think will have a decent game.
Yeah,
because
he's emerged.
He's emerged as a good guy.
Solid tight end.
Right.
Finally, after years after being converted to tight end, Dan Villari
He's not
is a
quarterback
weapon.
anymore.
He's not part quarterback, part running back, part tight end anymore. He is just a tight end. I do personally believe that if you take last year's Syracuse team and put them up against Clemson, at Clemson, this year's Clemson team, last year's Syracuse team, you put them together, Syracuse wins.
Oh, I agree.
I think if you take Syracuse's team from next year, right, and what they could be, retaining pieces, right, you take that team from next year and you put them up against the Clemson team of this year, I think Syracuse wins. But it's just this year, with the lack of experience, some of the offensive line issues against still a talented Clemson team, I don't see a world where they win this game. But like Fran Brown said, he likes being the underdog. And if anyone's going to break through, I mean, Fran Brown is not a bad pick to have break through what has been a rough stretch against Clemson.
It's kind of a weird scenario where no one is picking Syracuse, but also I don't think anyone would be completely surprised if they pull off the upset win because of what Syracuse has done the past year.
Yeah, I don't think any Syracuse fans would be because they know what the pedigree of the team is becoming. I don't think any Clemson fans would be either because they know the tough struggles that Clemson has had to start the year. So yeah, I think you're right. I don't think anybody would be surprised by that necessarily. I do think, though, that Syracuse with a win, like we talked about earlier, I mean, that is a big building block.
Yeah.
If they can get a win tomorrow, it doesn't matter if Clemson's a worse team this year than
It's
they've been in the past
Clemson
few
on
years.
the road.
It's Clemson on the road. It's like the Brian Scalabrine thing after they won the championship. It's like, I have a ring, you don't. In 5 years, I'll say, I played a couple minutes. In 10 years, I'll probably say I started. 20 years, I'll say I'm the greatest player of all time, right? If you take that to this perspective, right now, Syracuse, if they beat Clemson, sure, it's not a great win now, but they still won. You take that in 5 years, wow, they beat Clemson. You take that in 10 years, wow, they beat Clemson on the road. And then we're forgetting about the fact that, hey, there was once upon a time, Clemson was not so good.
I think if they win, it's the second best win in Fran Brown's tenure, only behind Miami.
Ooh. Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
I think so. You have some good ones. I mean, blowing the doors off Washington State in the Holiday Bowl was a good look, but Washington State was pretty depleted. You look last year, too, the win on the road over NC State, but that was a team dealing with injuries. This is a healthy Clemson team for the most part. We don't know about Antonio Williams yet, but a mostly healthy Clemson team on the road. I think you're right. I think this would be the second best win of Fran Brown's tenure if the Orange can pull it off.
Well, we've been talking about this game all broadcast, but how are you able to listen to it? Well, it's going to be here on WAER at noon tomorrow. McClure Modeling countdown to kickoff at 11:30 right here on WAER. And the double overtime, breaking down whatever happens in this one, will go up until 5 p.m. But that's just about all the time we have tonight on Sports Night. Some thank yous to hand out. Our producer, Timmy Weiss, our engineer, Jake Klein, our wonderful guest tonight, Cooper Andrews. Knows ball so well, had some great insight on this team, and of course our WAER Sports Talk desk members, Andrew Forrester and Nate Martin. Hudson, it's been a pleasure and a big chance for the Orange tomorrow.
It really has. Excited to hear how that game goes down. Tune in to WAER tomorrow to hear that countdown to kickoff, 11:30. You're not going to want to miss it.
Well, that's all the time we have for you tonight on Sports Night. Have a great night.